The sun was already setting, and in front of a chair, a guy was standing. Sitting on it was a curvaceous girl who told Yanmu that her brother wanted to buy a car. The protagonist closed his eyes, clenched the paper, and revealed that he had no more money. The woman then stood up and asked what had happened to this month's salary. She advised him to sell all the junk he had so he could give her money. But she soon noticed his pocket was empty and slapped him across the face. While Yanmu was devastated, she called him garbage and asked where he had hidden the money. He then looked at her, laughing, and said she was asking for it again. The girl grabbed a glass of water and threw it on him. What a humiliation. On the other hand, the art was really good. She then called him a loser and asked how he had the nerve to laugh. That lip of his, like a guy who had hit rock bottom, really sold it. He admitted he was trash and had no money left. Then he screamed, saying that just this month her parents had bought a house and a car with his money. Even if he earned $100 million a month, it wouldn't be enough for how much her family wanted to drain him dry. The woman then asked what he meant by her family, and questioned whether they didn't all consider themselves the same family. She said he was cold-hearted and asked why he didn't care about the family. Yanmu laughed. He told her to go to hell with that idiotic notion of family because he was tired of them. The woman, equally unfazed, told him if that was the case, he could die 100 times over. He spread his arms and asked if she really thought he didn't have the guts. She said she'd love to see him die, but first she wanted a moment to buy some life insurance, so at least she'd get some value out of it before he went. Yanmu smiled. He said Fang Yuxu really was tough after all. He turned and ran toward the window. She shouted at him, but the guy was about to find out if he could fly. In the middle of his fall, he wondered if that was truly the end of his life. Then the scene shifted to July 1st, 2009. A short-haired woman asked Yanmu why he was suddenly kneeling. A blonde guy questioned if kneeling as soon as you walked in the door was a family tradition of his. That's when the protagonist seemed to regain his senses. He was surprised, wondering if he was alive. The woman, arms crossed, asked if he was going crazy. He looked up and called her Mom. Apparently in China, when you marry a woman, you start calling her mother Mom. But this one only said he could call her that if he put another 40,000 into the wedding. The guy was a bit confused, wondering what kind of dowry price that was. Then he remembered it had all happened 8 years ago when he proposed to Fang Yuxu. The price had gone from 40,000 to 400,000, and she asked what he thought about that. Gradually, he got up, saying he thought a lot about it. In his past life, that wretched family had drained everything from him until he died in a pit. He then said he agreed. The so-called mother's eyes gleamed, and she asked if he was really willing to do it, but he shouted that there was no way he'd agree to such idiocy. Now that he'd been given a second chance, he wasn't about to make the same mistakes. The mother asked what he meant, questioning if he really thought her daughter wasn't worth $1 million. Fang Yuxu remained silent. Yanmu asked if the whole family had hearing or mental problems. He had already made it clear he wouldn't spend his cent on this wedding. Yuxu stood up and asked how he could do such a thing, but he replied that she should be arguing with her mother for being sold for $1 million. She made a pained expression and said it hadn't been easy for her relatives to raise her, so they deserved to ask for something. The father then wanted to know what he gained besides a loser brother who only wanted his money. The blonde idiot stood up, demanding to know who he was calling a loser. The father, mercilessly, said it was him who couldn't even earn enough to feed himself. The blonde guy went in for a big punch. But it seemed Yanmu had fought this guy in a past life and wasn't going to act the same way. He smashed the guy's head against the pavement while the mother screamed at him to let Xiaoyu go, who was supposedly family. But Yanmu responded that as long as he wasn't married, none of them were his family. He then turned around and declared that from this moment on he had nothing to do with any of them. Fang Yuxu asked if their relationship wasn't worth any money at all. Yanmu asked if she had ever wondered how many of his relatives had worked hard to earn $500,000. In his past life, his hopeful father spent everything he had on lottery tickets and ended up winning. With that, he gave $500,000, and Yanmu gave the other half, securing the marriage. That was a man who gave his all. Yanmu then walked out the door, saying all she wanted was someone to support her family, and that someone wasn't going to be him. The next scene shows him already at the same lottery his father had won before. The prize had accumulated to over $100 million. In his past life, at this very moment, he went down and won a ticket with his father. He hoped he could clearly remember this, even though his memories were muddled from the passage of time. He then walked to the counter and said he wanted to buy a lottery ticket. The clerk informed him that the drawing would be held tonight at 9:15 p.m. That's when he glanced to the side and saw his father arriving. His father wondered if he was really seeing his son, since theoretically, he was supposed to be at Fang Yuxu's place. Yanmu noticed that his father looked completely worn out and wondered if he ever had a chance to rest. He hid so his father wouldn't see him. At that moment, his father, clutching a ticket, was praying that if he won, he wouldn't have to worry about the price of his son's wedding. Yanmu swore that from this day on, his family would never suffer again. That's when the system came into play. The novice mission was to win $100 million and build his own industry. He had 24 hours to do this, but 3 hours had already passed, leaving him with only 21 hours. If he failed, he would lose his life. The protagonist was understandably confused. The next scene took him back to his home. Looking at his hand, he knew he had 21 hours left according to this system. Suddenly, he heard a voice asking what someone was doing and telling them to let go. Yanmu recognized the voice as Mang Yo's. He rushed up the stairs, calling her name and asking what was wrong. Manhwa was a childhood friend, almost like a sister to him. In his past life, her mother had borrowed money from loan sharks, and as expected, things turned grim when they couldn't repay. Both ended up in their graves. Yanmu swore he would protect her in this life. Inside one of the rooms, two men were taunting her, saying she could scream all she wanted because no one would save her. One of them, with an open shirt, mocked her for possibly calling Yanmu, implying he was useless. In the next moment, Yanmu delivered a swift blow to the first guy. He saved her quickly. It was a punch and a hug, a spot and rescue. The blonde guy didn't even know who had hit him. Another man approached from behind, asking if Yanmu was tired of living. But Yanmu easily immobilized his arm, questioning how a gangster could be so bad at fighting. The blonde guy called him a bastard and pulled out a cutter, threatening to kill him. Yanmu, however, stated that he knew they were there for money, warning that if anyone made a move, they'd never get paid. The men questioned if he actually had money. The one in the red shirt scoffed, saying it was obvious he was dirt poor. The blonde then pointed out that the debt exceeded $500,000. Yanmu responded that he would have the money in 3 days. This time, instead of spending $500,000 on one woman, he would spend it on another. A genius move indeed. Another man reminded them of several outstanding medical debts. The blonde warned that if the due date came and they didn't have the money, Manhwa would have to cover his debt. Yanmu declared that when he delivered the money, everyone would have to kneel and apologize to her. As they left, they mocked him, saying he should try his luck or he'd be without legs soon. The system then reminded him he had 20 hours left to complete the mission and had to act fast. His life was tied to survival points, and at the moment he had very few, so his body would begin to show symptoms. The system mentioned a real estate agency that was about to go bankrupt. While he pondered how his life was now determined by points, Manhwa called out to him, apologizing and saying she didn't want to drag him down with her. Yanmu told her not to worry and reassured her that within 3 days he'd ensure they apologized. But then his body reacted. His head began to throb and he felt nauseous. Manhwa asked if he was okay, and he collapsed on the mountain. The fall was intense, and seeing him hit the ground was truly heartbreaking. He apologized, saying he was hungry and felt weak, but he quickly realized these were the adverse symptoms the system had warned about. The scene then shifted to the Fang family home. The mother asked if he had responded to her call, to which Fang Yuxi said he hadn't. The father was ready to slap her, asking how it was possible to have a daughter who couldn't even control a man. The mother told Lao Fang to lower his hand, saying there was something off about Yanmu today. The father scratched his chin, agreeing it was strange since he usually groveled at Yuxu's feet. He wondered if Yanmu had somehow gotten rich. He then told his daughter that she needed to go and win him back before another woman did. The worst thing would be for him to become rich and for her to lose her chance to be his wife. Even the mother began pushing her out of the house, telling her to go and capture that man. No sympathy here for this cursed woman, though Fang Yuxu was now questioning why Yanmu had acted so differently today. Back with our boy, Yanmu was serving some apples to Manhwa when the doorbell rang. She said she would get it, and outside it was, of course, Fang Yuxu. As soon as she saw Yanmu, she demanded to know what was going on. Yanmu asked if he hadn't made it clear that there was nothing between them anymore, or if she was there because her snobby mother wasn't satisfied. Fang Yuxu, however, shouted that it was impossible and wanted to know if he was interested in someone else or if he changed his mind just because they raised the wedding price. Yanmu told her to give up, that anything between them was completely impossible. He said that out of whatever bond they once had, he'd give her some advice. She should leave that house as soon as possible and live more freely. She ignored him, turned around, called him a delicate son of a mother, and swore he would regret it. Manhwa stood there, confused, not understanding what was happening. As far as she remembered, they were close, so how had things turned this way? Yanmu told her to stay at his place for now because he had to leave for a trip. He muttered to himself that he didn't care about that stupid relationship and that it was time to explore the available businesses in the city. Out on Jiangxing Street, people were talking about the lottery drawing. Apparently, fortune fever was running wild in China. His father was there, saying all he wanted was for his son to buy a house and get married. Yanmu was hiding carefully. He didn't want anyone to know he was about to win. While watching the news, he noticed a real estate company called Fidelidade that seemed like a promising place to invest. He already knew that in the future, this company would become massive, but right now, they were facing serious challenges. If he took control of the company, he could potentially become extremely wealthy within a few years. He decided that this would be his first investment. The scene shifted to the Fidelidade real estate company the next day at 9:20 a.m. The place already looked like it had declared bankruptcy, and there were people shouting at the entrance. The system reminded him that his survival chances were low and he had little time left to complete the mission. Unfortunately, he had to visit the bank to collect his lottery winnings, which delayed him. A man in a yellow helmet walked by mentioning he was bringing a banner. Yanmu asked why everyone was there, and they explained they hadn't been paid for half a year. Yanmu said it was common for payments from construction companies to be a little late, just a little 6 months. However, another person said that usually they could pay at the end, but in this case, the company's boss had fled, leaving the business deep in debt. Clearly, they wouldn't have any money to pay anyone, so they needed some way to get something. Yan Mu, though, seemed excited, asking if the boss really had run away. The man confirmed, saying it was information from the top employees of the company. Yan Mu left excitedly, thanking the guy. His time was limited, but at least his chances of achieving his goal were increasing. In front of a black car, people held up signs demanding payment before leaving. The company, called Fuda, had Kong Ru, a 40-year-old man wearing glasses, as its former owner. A bald man named Libio, serving as his bodyguard, muttered that the dogs were going crazy. He asked Kong why he didn't just hire people to deal with the mess, but Kong replied that letting them bark was better than inviting more trouble. At that moment, Yan Mu knocked on the window, startling the bald man. He had 25 minutes left to complete his mission. Yan Mu opened the car door and entered. He introduced himself to Kong Ru, saying he was there to talk business. The bald man grabbed him by the collar, asking if he really wanted to die. Yan Mu calmly stated that he had information that could prevent Kong Ru from spending the rest of his life behind bars. The boss told him to forget about money since he didn't have the means to pay anyone. But then Yan Mu revealed that he was there to give money. He offered to assume all the company's debts, including overdue wages, but in return, he wanted ownership of the Fuda real estate company. Kong questioned if Yan Mu understood the value he was talking about since they owed a lot, especially to unpaid employees. Yan Mu, with just 10 minutes left on the system's clock, said he'd take it all. Kong said he wouldn't even start talking for less than 50 million. Yan Mu agreed to the amount. Suddenly, Kong shouted, asking why this kid who barely had facial hair was raising his voice. The bodyguard told him to stop making up numbers. Yan Mu silenced him with a swift blow to the throat. Kong was shocked that this kid had taken down his bodyguard. He told the bald man to hold back and asked Yan Mu not to waste his time if he didn't have the money to pay employees. Yan Mu insisted he take the land and debts for 50 million and pay immediately. He knew Kong Ru was desperate to escape, and acquiring as much land as possible in the city was his goal. Yan Mu demanded everything Kong had in his name in the area. Kong asked if he was trying to make a fool of him. For the boss, getting rid of those properties was urgent. Yan Mu reassured him it was no joke and asked him to name his price. With just 5 minutes left on the system timer, the boss questioned if Yan Mu was serious, while the bald bodyguard thought he was insane. The system warned him again that with 3 minutes remaining, his senses would begin to shut down. Yan Mu confirmed he was serious and asked if the boss had made a decision. He was determined to buy the Fuda company, no matter what happened. The boss then said that if he had at least 20 million right then, they could make the transfer, and he could pay the rest later. The problem was that Yan Mu's hearing had already failed. While it seemed like a foolish situation, Yan Mu cleverly deduced from the boss's mouth movements and gestures that he was likely asking for around 20 million. Kong Ru instructed Li Biao to handle the transfer to Mr. Yan. The countdown continued with only 10 seconds remaining. Yan Mu's vision was fading, and he needed to finalize the deal by pressing his fingerprint. With 6 seconds left and then 4 seconds, the transaction succeeded. However, Yan Mu collapsed at the bank, questioning why the system hadn't announced the mission's completion. His energy was still being drained, and he felt death was imminent. At that moment, the system finally congratulated him, awarding him 13 survival points. Yan Mu didn't celebrate, he was simply relieved to be alive. The system explained that survival points could be used in the system's store or to extend his life. Meanwhile, the commotion erupted as someone shouted at Kong Ru. A man in front asked Yan Mu if he was okay. Yan Mu confirmed and told Kong Ru to use the money to pay the workers as soon as possible. Kong Ru instructed the man to inform everyone outside that they would be paid by the evening. The announcement was made through the sunroof, but the skeptical crowd doubted that months of overdue payments would suddenly be resolved. One of them said that if they weren't paid, they'd return to put an end to it for good. The bodyguard asked what their next step would be, and Kong Ru suggested returning with Yan Mu to strategize. The scene shifted to the real estate office, where the former president brought documents for Yan Mu to review. Yan Mu dismissed the old plans and marked certain areas on a map. He pointed out specific lands to purchase and others to leave untouched. Kong Ru complained that one of the areas Yan Mu wanted to buy was isolated and abandoned, calling it a waste of money. Yan Mu, however, insisted it was the perfect spot for future development as new schools and buildings would soon emerge there, making it ideal for a commercial district. Yan Mu elaborated, saying they would build an entire shopping complex, including shops, a hotel, and more, with a unique design that met safety standards. Kong Ru agreed to handle it and was told by Yan Mu that good work would always be rewarded. Kong then invited Yan Mu to an upcoming investment meeting. The scene shifted to the Jingping Hotel, where Yan Mu inquired about the investment event. He glanced back and was surprised to see Fang Yuxu there wearing a revealing dress. A chubby man beside her blushed, saying he hadn't expected her to look so stunning. Fang Yuxu appeared annoyed, as this was the only man willing to pay the exorbitant wedding price. The man pulled her aside, asking if she was distracted. It was then that she noticed Yan Mu. They exchanged looks but said nothing. The blonde-haired man sensed they might know each other. Yan Mu reflected on how quickly Fang Yuxu had moved on and dismissed any concern. It was none of his business. However, when the blonde man bumped into him on purpose, Yan Mu asked what he thought he was doing. The man accused Yan Mu of standing in the way and jabbed a finger at his chest, questioning if someone as poor as him even knew where he was. Yanmu mocked the man for his appearance, but the blonde man demanded to know if Yanmu had any idea who he was and whether he really wanted to pick a fight in front of the girl. Ignoring him, Yanmu asked Fang Yuxu about her relationship with this man, to which she replied that it had nothing to do with him. The blonde man walked away, taunting Yanmu for dreaming he'd ever have a woman like Fang Yuxu. Yanmu reflected that he had once thought Fang Yuxu was a simple and kind girl and believed the problem was her family, but it seemed he was wrong, and this realization allowed him to finally let go. The scene shifted to the investment reception. The system assigned Yanmu a mission to invest in one of the businesses present to earn 10 more points. Yanmu knew this would be challenging, given the people in attendance. A security guard blocked his entrance, asking if he knew where he was going. Yanmu asked if this wasn't the investment reception. The guard sneered, telling him to leave because the event was for people planning to spend millions. Yanmu ignored all of it and simply stated that he was also there to make some investments. However, the security guard mocked him, asking what kind of investor walked around in janitor clothes. Yanmu was not pleased by being judged based on his attire. At that moment, the blonde-haired man appeared and asked if Yanmu was following them. The guard laughed, saying that this kid really seemed lost and was even claiming he was there to invest. The chubby man chimed in, saying that Yanmu needed to learn to invest in himself first. He placed a hand on Yanmu's shoulder, condescendingly remarking that he had energy but couldn't waste it by just chasing after women. He said there was no use in Yanmu getting angry since that beauty would stay in his arms. Yanmu was about to walk past, but the guard blocked him again. At that moment, the chubby man noticed something and mentioned that Brother Kong had finally arrived. Yanmu glanced at Fang Yuxue and asked if she was doing this for money. She claimed it had nothing to do with him, but he pressed further, asking if she was truly willing to do anything for money and degrade herself in such a way. She remained silent and he turned away. Meanwhile, the chubby man asked Kong if his company had recently been acquired. Kong confirmed, and the chubby man mentioned that he too was looking to sell his business, though times were tough. As they spoke, Kong noticed someone else and excused himself, saying he had another person to speak to. He approached Yanmu. The chubby man, now puzzled, wondered why Kong Ru was addressing the young man as Mr. Yan. Fang Yuxu, watching from the sidelines, was equally curious. Mr. Ma, the chubby man, asked Kong if he had lost his mind by calling such a young man his boss. Kong clarified that they were misunderstanding. Mr. Yanmu was indeed the new owner of Fuda. The chubby man was shocked, asking if this was the person who had recently bought the company. Kong confirmed it. Immediately, Meidong turned to Yanmu, apologizing profusely for his previous behavior. He claimed it was all just a joke, that he didn't know Yanmu's identity, and begged for forgiveness, promising to do whatever was asked of him. Yanmu turned to him and asked if he was Mr. Meidong. Meidong confirmed, and Yanmu coldly told him to leave. Naturally, Meidong left fuming, muttering that Yanmu would pay for this humiliation. Once inside the event, Kong Rui asked if Yanmu had any particular investments in mind. Yanmu replied that he hadn't decided yet and needed to look around, knowing that the best auctions were likely already taken. That's when he noticed a booth for a company called Nebula, which would become highly influential in the internet industry. The representative handed him a card, explaining that they would be producing wireless routers. Yanmu recognized the man as Zhang Penju, the company's founder. Seeing him working so hard now made it clear why Nebula became so successful in the future. Kong advised against investing, claiming it was a foreign company with little value in the local market. Others agreed, dismissing the idea of internet routers as a distant prospect, not worth investing in yet. Penju insisted that routers were the future, with wireless signals soon becoming essential worldwide. The others scoffed, saying only an idiot would invest in something like that. They argued that such a business shouldn't even qualify for investment opportunities. That's when Yanmu pulled out a card and announced he would invest 15 million in the company. Penju, sweating nervously, asked if he was serious. Yanmu confirmed, saying he was optimistic about their future, confident that with the growth of the internet, Nebula would become a major force. Out of nowhere, Meidong appeared again, shouting for everyone not to listen to Yanmu, calling him a beggar spouting nonsense. He was about to insult Yanmu when Kong stepped in, warning Meidong to be quiet since they were friends, but this would be his last warning. Suddenly, Meidong revealed Kong's plans to abandon the company and leave everyone unpaid. The other investors started whispering, calling Kong untrustworthy. Meidong sneered, saying Kong would be smarter not to be the dog of this kid. Kong began to protest, but Yanmu cut him off, asking Meidong if he truly thought he didn't have 15 million to invest. Meidong arrogantly confirmed, saying he could spot a liar easily, especially one as poor as Yanmu. Yanmu challenged him to a bet. If he could produce the 15 million to invest, Meidong would have to kneel, publicly apologize, and slap himself 3 times. Meidong hesitated, sure Yanmu had no money, but worried about the consequences if he did. Just then, someone interrupted, saying that Mr. Mei was ruining the fun for everyone. It was Tang Ning, the second son of the Tang family, a significant figure, judging by Meidong's trembling reaction. Yanmu knew the Tang family produced materials essential for Nebula's equipment. Since he wants to invest in those guys, it would be perfect if he could get closer to them. Tang Ning asks what's going on, and Mei Dong says they're just having fun, joking around, nothing serious. However, Tang Ning asks if they really think he's an idiot, as he's sure something's going on and wants them to continue. Mei Dong says fine then, they'll make the bet. Meanwhile, Kong asks our guy if he's sure he wants to make this bet. Our guy says he's sure, but the problem is he doesn't know where his card is. At that moment, Fang Yuxu tells him he should just disappear before he embarrasses himself. She thinks to herself that this supposed fortune he seems to have is clearly a lie. Mei Dong grabs Fang Yuxu and tells our guy to stop pretending and just admit he lost the bet. However, it turns out the guy is just messing around. He dramatically pulls out the card out of nowhere. He turns to Penju and says that if he agrees to the deal, he'll make the investment right now. The president obviously agrees and says he'll go get the machine, thinking that despite his shabby appearance, this guy is reliable. Just then, Mei Dong intervened, ridiculing Yan Mu as a beggar and snatching his card, showing everyone it was a basic card. He mocked Yan Mu for lacking a special card if he had such wealth. Yan Mu took back the card, stating they'd soon see who had money. The transaction was initiated, but the machine showed insufficient funds. Mei Dong laughed, calling Yan Mu a fraud. Yan Mu, confused, couldn't understand why his funds were inaccessible. Kong wondered what to do next, and Penju, sensing something was wrong, believed Yan Mu wasn't lying. Mei Dong pretended to be magnanimous, suggesting he forgive Yan Mu and wouldn't demand he kneel. But Tang Ming intervened, asserting that bets must be honored. Kong protested, saying banking errors were possible. Mei Dong, growing impatient, demanded Yan Mu settle the bet. Yan Mu declared that Mei Dong feared he truly had money and wanted to escape. Mei Dong scoffed, claiming he had nothing to fear from a child. He ordered security to force Yan Mu to kneel if he didn't comply. Yan Mu calmly said it was too soon to conclude anything. As tensions rose, Yan Mu disappeared in a blur, taking down 2 guards instantly. Fang Yuxu was stunned, unable to comprehend Yan Mu's newfound combat skills. Even Tang Ming was amazed by how quickly Yan Mu dispatched the guards. Bank officials approached, but Mei Dong dismissed them. Tang Ning insisted the matter be resolved. As the account balance was checked, Mei Dong mocked the notion of Yan Mu having 50 million. Yan Mu confirmed he did, explaining his funds were temporarily frozen pending verification. Once cleared, he'd receive a higher tier card. The news stunned Fang Yuxi and Mei Dong. Yan Mu asked if the transfer could proceed, while the chubby man accused the bank official of being a stooge. The official handed Mei Dong the card, confirming everything was legitimate. Shortly after, he informed Yan Mu his bank issue was resolved, and he'd soon receive a gold card. Enraged, Mei Dong dismissed the significance of Yan Mu's wealth, demanding he make the promised investment. Yan Mu completed the transaction successfully. Kong asked if Mei Dong had anything more to say. Cornered, Mei Dong claimed they'd set him up and refused to kneel. Tang Ning kicked him behind the knee, reminding him to honor his bet. Mei Dong slapped himself, apologizing to Yan Mu, but Yan Mu pressed, saying he hadn't finished everything as agreed. Yan Mu, still maintaining his calm demeanor, suggested to Mei Dong that he might want to tell the truth about the former situation with Mr. Kong's company. Mei Dong, cornered, apologized, admitting that the issues with unpaid salaries were all fabricated. Before leaving, he muttered under his breath that he would eventually put Yan Mu in a coffin. The Nebula founder approached Yan Mu, expressing his gratitude and assuring him that he would not disappoint. The crowd surrounded and praised Yan Mu, while Fang Yuxu was left questioning if he had always been this wealthy. She recalled her parents pushing her to meet Mei Dong that day, insisting she find a rich man as they saw no value in raising her otherwise. Her mother made her usual dramatic claims, saying she wasn't forcing her, but failure would mean the family's extinction. As Tang Ming observed, stating their meeting must be destiny, Fang Yuxu left. Yan Mu earned his points from the system, which then informed him it would take a 10% cut of his earnings. Yan Mu was irritated by the unexpected tax. At that moment, Kong's bald assistant informed them of a new issue. Workers were rioting again despite the transfer of payments. The workers demanded severance, fearing job loss under new management. Kong, unsure of how to handle the situation with projects taking time to commence, asked Yan Mu what they should do. Yan Mu suggested returning to the company to assess the situation. Arriving at Fuda's site, chaos erupted as workers clashed. A helmeted worker pushed a blonde man against the wall, demanding to meet with Mr. Kong. In the commotion, a drill was brandished and, shockingly, used. Someone called for an ambulance as Yan Mu and his team arrived. The injured worker was unconscious, with others shouting about preventing intrusions. Yan Mu calmly asked if an ambulance had been called. The bald assistant confirmed, but it would take 10 minutes and by then it might be too late. One desperate worker kneeled, explaining his daughter was ill and he needed money. The scene stirred memories of Yan Mu's father. Another worker struggled to help, realizing the injured man wasn't breathing. Kong ordered the 2 instigators bound. They smugly claimed they were helping establish order, but the bald assistant scolded them, blaming their stupidity for worsening the situation. Yan Mu, noticing the dying worker, asked the system if he could be saved. The system offered a costly upgrade option to obtain a medicine that might work, but all Yan Mu could access was basic enhancements. The system then proposed another solution, spending 12 survival points to keep the man alive until medical help arrived. The function was one-time use, so caution was advised. Yanmu hesitated but agreed, unwilling to stand by idly. The workers' condition stabilized and the instigators were thrown to the ground. Yanmu, furious, condemned their reckless actions. Realization struck these were the same thugs who had threatened Mangyo earlier. When Kong inquired, they admitted it, revealing that Yanmu was burdened with a debt caused by a neighbor's gambling mother with plans to exploit his sister. Kong, enraged, demanded to know if they had been misusing the company's name and ruining its reputation. Yanmu confirmed Meidong's involvement. Kong acknowledged the connection but assured Yanmu they would handle it now that he was in charge. Without a second thought, Yanmu delivered a swift kick to the blonde instigator's chest, ensuring his actions had consequences. The workers cheered at the sight of Yanmu dealing with the thugs, especially since those two had been harassing them. Finally, the ambulance arrived and the paramedics pushed through the crowd to attend to the injured man. Kong expressed relief that the situation hadn't turned fatal. Unsure of what to do next, he asked Yanmu for guidance. Yanmu stated that their first priority should be calming the workers, but the problem was there was no work available for now. The workers voiced their distrust, complaining that they were always promised payment but never saw results. Yanmu assured them that the company would implement formal employment contracts, making it legally binding to pay them. The workers, many of whom were likely undocumented, seemed cautiously hopeful. Some remarked that they'd heard contracts meant mandatory payments by law, though they were unfamiliar with the details. Kong allowed Yanmu to take charge, noting that without him, the company would have collapsed. When Kong asked what should be done about the two thugs, Yanmu said their focus should be on preserving the company's reputation. He recommended covering all medical expenses for the injured worker. Kong promised to handle it, ensuring nothing would be overlooked. Yanmu then left, advising Kong to deal with the troublemakers. Back at Yanmu's home, he wondered if his parents were back yet. Opening the door, he was greeted by a bright sunbeam. Mengyao asked why he was late. He explained he had business to attend to. She inquired if he was working extra hard to marry Fang Yuxu. Yanmu dismissed the notion, promising instead to find a better place for her soon. He knew Mangyo's dream was to live in a grand house, and perhaps he could make it happen tomorrow. She asked what surprise he had in store, but he suggested she rest first since it was late. Lying in bed, Yanmu reflected on the system's grip over not just his life but the lives of others. He wondered about its limitations. The system then informed him he could enter a unique space when in a secure location. The room distorted and the system asked if he was ready for his inheritance. Confused, he questioned what inheritance it meant. As he looked down, he saw an image of himself from before his rebirth. The system explained that he must accept the Lord's inheritance or the world would be annihilated. Not much of a choice, he thought, and before he could answer, the process began. The system warned that after receiving the inheritance, his level would be restricted, and no more missions would be available for a while. Staring at his hand, Yanmu wondered what was happening. The inheritance completed and the system displayed a progress bar, 1%. It explained that without sufficient attributes, he couldn't unlock all abilities. Yanmu groaned, frustrated by the system's games, but resolved to claim everything in due time. From outside, Mengyao asked if he was tired. He opened the door and saw her standing there. It was morning and Mengyao reminded him that he had promised to take her out. Apologizing, Yanmu assured her they would leave soon.
And here we reach the end. Thank you for watching, drop a like if you enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and peace out.